Welcome to midweek reflections from St. Paul Lutheran Church. Today is Wednesday, February 24th, 2021. A reading from Genesis, chapter 50, verses 15 through 21. Realizing that their father was dead, Joseph's brothers said, "What if Joseph still bears a grudge against us and pays us back in full for all the wrong that we did to him?" So they approached Joseph, saying, "Your father gave this instruction before he died. Say to Joseph, 'I beg you, forgive the crime of your brothers and the wrong they did in harming you. Now, therefore, please forgive the crime of the servants of the God of your father.' Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Then his brothers also wept, fell down before him and said, 'We are here as your slaves.' But Joseph said to them, 'Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? Even though you intended to do harm to me, God intended it for good, in order to preserve a numerous people, as he is doing today. So have no fear. I myself will provide for you and your little ones.' In this way he reassured them, speaking kindly to them." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, what a year, huh? It was around this time last year that the pandemic started. And we have all been through so much these last 12 months. All of us have experienced changes that we never would have expected before. We've lost the ability to travel. We've lost jobs. Some people have lost their lives. And yes, some people have received or will receive their COVID vaccine shot, which is great. But unfortunately, we're not out of the woods just yet. This is a year that has been the worst year that any of us can remember. And so that's why my midweek reflections for this year will be on the theme of hope. Right now, hope isn't just thinking that tomorrow is going to be better than today. Hope is about trusting that God is still in charge, even when the world has gone crazy. So I'll talk about a few different Bible stories where people face difficult challenges, like we've been facing, but they've also found hope in the midst of it. And the first story that came to mind was the story of Joseph. Here's a guy who knows what it's like to have bad things happen to him. Right, over the course of his life, Joseph was thrown into a pit by his brothers who faked his death. He was taken into slavery, and he was imprisoned for a crime that he didn't commit. Joseph started his life as his father's favorite son, and he flaunted his dreams in front of his father and his brothers. Well, then his brothers' jealousy led to a whole bunch of bad things happening to him. And yes, Joseph was partly responsible. Right? If you read the passage about what happened in the early part of his life, he was a bit of a jerk to his family. But it was not all his doing. His brothers played a big role in all of this too. Over the course of the story, as we follow Joseph from his home into Egypt, he grows. He matures. He shows that he trusts more in God than in himself now. Right, at the start of the story, he was bragging about his dreams, arrogantly thinking that he was better than all of his brothers. But by the end of the story, Joseph used his position as second in charge in Egypt to provide for his brothers. And notice what he said when he finally revealed himself to them. Even though you intended to do harm to me, God intended it for good, in order to preserve a numerous people, as he is doing today. Right? His brothers may have intended to do harm to Joseph, but God was able to work through all of those events to bring something good out of it. Sometimes the problems we face in life are our own fault, and we must take responsibility for them. Sometimes we learn and mature through the struggles in life. But sometimes the bad things in life just happen, and they are out of our control, like this pandemic. Joseph had a lot of tragedy thrown at him. And as he matured, he realized that he was not the one who was most important. God is. At the start of this pandemic, everybody was freaking out. We were all trying to maintain some sense of control for ourselves. Each person was looking out for themselves and their families, thinking that they were the most important. Right? We stockpiled toilet paper, wanting to make sure that we were okay. But as the pandemic has gone on, people have reached out to others. We've found new ways of connecting with one another. We've served one another. Think about all of the extra phone calls that have been made or video chats that have happened. Think about those extra handwritten letters that have been mailed. Think about the meals that have been delivered. We have learned the importance of intentionally strengthening our relationships with others. We've learned that relationships aren't just about being in the same room with someone, because we can't really do that anymore. Relationships are about the hard work of reconciliation and communication. Joseph and his brothers learned that too. Their relationship was much better at the end of this story than it was at the beginning. And this pandemic has helped us learn things that we probably wouldn't have learned otherwise. Even though God did not cause this pandemic, just like how God didn't cause the events in Joseph's life, God does still bring good from it. And yes, it is hard to physically be away from others. It's hard not being able to travel and go places. It's hard when our lives feel like they're turned upside down. But God is still doing something good in the midst of all this. God is working through us to serve others and reconnect with loved ones, just as God worked in Joseph's life too. God is bringing about a new thing for you and for those around you. God is still in charge. Even in a pandemic, God is still our hope. Amen.